Welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining me on night 2. This is gonna be fun. I want to take you along with me as we hit the road. Let's go.
Let's go.
The story tonight is talking about the bikes that we had in 2022 so far, and how we found them, and what we did with them, and how we sold them to eventually buy the trailer. That's essentially what this video is going to be about, is the process of finding bikes, buying bikes, and trying to make money at it. So let's get started. The first bike that we kind of took on was, that's kind of kicked off this whole bike buying business, was the CB750. And the reason why I say it like that, aside from, you know, the Virago story we had from last night, was that bike we only had for like 2 days. I got a call from a friend of mine. He said he found this in a barn. He actually found it in a barn. So we went and looked at it, and yep, sure enough, everything, you know, it's pretty dirty, dusty. Tires are all flat, and looks like it's been sitting there for a long time. And picked it up for 300 bucks. Brought it home, gave it a bath, made a couple of contacts to someone that I thought might have more interest in maybe possibly restoring it, and he was more interested in just having it for a parts bike. So I threw him out a price. I said 800 bucks just to kind of see how it went, and he said, how about 6? So there you go. Had that bike literally for like 48 hours, double my money. Pretty cool. Let's move on to a new location and a new bike. Here we are, site number 2. Bike number 2. The second bike that we had was the 2005 Yamaha V-Star. Now this bike was your typical Facebook marketplace find. Looked pretty nice in the pictures. The guy actually had a couple of decent pictures, which is sometimes an interesting event in its own. The way that people try to evaluate their bikes by giving them a high value, but then their pictures really suck. But nonetheless, he wanted $1,500. Said it ran, had a title in his name. That's going to be a key component to a lot of these bikes as we kind of discuss this tonight. So I went up and looked at it. It wasn't too far from my place. And yeah, it didn't run with the crap. It started up fine. When we go to ride it, I rode it, literally tried to ride around the block, and it just suffered the entire time. So he confessed that he tried to clean the carbs, and ever since then it just was running poorly. I offered him $800. He didn't really like that, but he kind of thought about it for a minute, and then he agreed. And then he gave me a whole bunch of junk that came with the bike when he bought it that he didn't want, and neither did I really. But we took it and got it home. We cleaned the carbs out, and noticed when he put the carbs back together, he put them together wrong. And I'm not saying that I'm some sort of genius mechanic. I just kind of happened to have the same problem when I put it back together. Noticed that looked weird. Still didn't run very good. Did a little bit of investigation. And though this investigation that I'm talking about isn't difficult to come up with, I looked at a service manual. There you go. Figured out how to put the carburetors back together properly, put them back on the bike, and presto, she ran like a top. The bike was in really decent shape, gave it a nice little bath, and put it up for sale. Only had that bike for about a week. No, maybe a little longer than that, maybe a couple of weeks. So we made a couple of videos on that bike, and then I put it up for sale and sold it in 2 days. We listed it for $3,000 and we sold it for $25,000. Profit zone. That was pretty exciting. And that really got the juices flowing, right? First bike, we doubled our money. The second bike, tripled our money. Well, we had a couple of expenses in there besides just purchasing the bike, but you kind of get where this is going. So, all right, let's keep this train rolling. So, bike number 3. Bike number 3 is an interesting bike because it's in the bikes of 2022, but it didn't make us any money. My brother-in-law asked me to find him a bike and we did. With his help, I mean, we kind of researched what he wanted. He wanted a cruiser, didn't want to spend very much money. And then we found a bike, which is the Vulcan. And basically all I did was I kind of, you know, curated the deal, went and bought the bike from the guy, put, you know, changed the oil, and then just transferred it to him. So that doesn't really count, but it's in the Bikes of 2022 video, so I thought I'd just mention it. The next one's kind of an interesting one. It's kind of a cool story. I was out, so I'm just kind of driving around, and was waiting on Chase doing something, I think, and I was kind of perusing around Facebook, and I saw this XS750 Yamaha triple. I'm like, that's an interesting bike. I mean, it definitely looked like it had the cafe style, you know, something that I kind of enjoy doing. Definitely thought it could be a bike that I could build in the future. I'm like, yeah, we'll take a look at that. The interesting thing was, super crappy pictures, like they were taken in the dark. So some of them had a flash, some of them didn't, some of them were blurry, but you could kind of tell in one of the pictures that it kind of looked like a bike that might be worthwhile. And it was still on a trailer. That was kind of the interesting thing. And the guy wanted $1,000 for it. Well, I've made this rule a long time ago. Eventually you might have to lift this threshold, but I've never paid more than $1,000 for a bike. And so I generally try to, when I'm doing my searches, look at $1,500 to $1,800 to see if you can then negotiate down to that price, but sometimes that's even difficult to do. And so at any rate, call the guy, say, yeah, come out and take a look at it. So the story from him was he had seen this bike leaned up against a tree at the end of his street, contacted like a kind of a neighbor of his. He's like, hey, what are you doing with that motorcycle? He's like, I don't know, I just don't want it in my garage anymore. He's like, oh, that's too good of a bike to ruin. So he bought it from him, put it on a trailer, put it in his barn, and it sat there for a year. And he went and brought it to his house, still strapped down from when he got it, never did anything with it. And nonetheless, we kind of looked at it. It was missing a lot of things. It didn't have a shifter, lever, it didn't have any brakes on the front. So I offered him substantially less than what he was asking. And I thought it was a pretty ballsy move. We kind of looked at it for a while with each other, and then I'm like, how about $250 and I'll take it tonight? And he's like, it's yours. I was shocked. I'm like, oh my God, how did that happen? But anyway, we got it. And the reason why I think this makes this more of an interesting story is because how we sold that bike. We sold that bike in a trade, and I have never even really considered trades before. But I had this bike, had it for sale. We got it running and riding. I mean, I still didn't have front brakes, but at least I had videos of it going down the road, videos of it running. And a guy contacted me. I was trying to sell it for $800. I thought, you know, if he could try to get 1,000 with it in the crappy shape that it was in, at least now it's running and it rides. We'll see what it goes. And I had a guy interested in it, but he just strung me along for months, probably 6 weeks. Every week he's going to come get it. Every week he didn't have the money. Eventually I told him I just had enough of it, and he's like, well, I really, really want it. What can we do? And he goes, I'll trade you something for it. I'm like, I don't want to trade. I'm in the business of the moment selling the bike. I'm not trying to trade for a different bike. And so we left it at that. He called me back a couple of weeks later, and he said that he had acquired a 1999 Virago 1100, and oh, that piqued my interest right away, because I'd had a Virago, but a 750. I'm like, that'd be pretty cool. Kind of see what the differences are. And I think we are losing light quickly, man. Winter, I tell you what. But nonetheless, the Virago, it intrigued me. I really wanted to see what the difference was between a 750 and an 1100. So I put up a bike I had that I really didn't want to sell, at least not right now. I mentioned to him that I had a 1980 CB900, and he knew right away what that was. He asked me kind of questions about it, took some pictures and sent it to him, and he's like, yep, I'm in. I'll trade you your 2 bikes for mine. And you know, this is the thing about trades, is someone's gonna suffer, right? Unless you're coming up with cash on one of the ends, which I refused. I told him, this is what I got. If you want it, this is what we'll do. If not, then either buy the XS750 or don't. But he agreed to it. So I put him on a trailer and I took him out to his place and we made the deal. And reason why I say that someone will be on the winning or losing end is because eventually I was going to sell the CB900. I had changed my mind. That was going to be a future build, but then I changed my mind. We're just going to put it back together as a cruiser and as a road bike, and just add the bags and stuff back on it and sell it. It was in really nice condition to keep, continuing on the path of cafeing it out. And I say that, but yeah, I probably would have done it anyway. But at any rate, if I would have sold that bike eventually, I was wanting to get like 1,800, and the XS750, I probably would have settled for $6. You know, there again, I had put some stuff into it, some time and effort, and double my money, right? So if you add those up, we go on the high side, we get 2,400 bucks. I got the Virago from him. I had that for a while. It needed absolutely nothing. We drove it around for a little bit, made a couple videos, put it up for sale, and we sold it for 25. So more than what we could have sold on a very optimistic day, what we could have sold the XS750 and the CB900 for. So I think it was a decent trade. It was weird. I don't know if I'll do that again. And the weirdness not only was because it was a trade, it also was an out-of-state deal with a title not in the guy's name. Oh, and I did not know that until we went there. So here's some bike buying tips that probably correlate more to just bikes. But number one, I don't even respond to ads unless it's titled. Number two, like, here's a common thing: no title, no keys, no money, basically. You know, they're trying to sell it for very little. Never would I do that. You know, I don't want to ever be on the losing end of a guy trying to push a stolen anything, right? So title is important to me. I know that you can get titles through various avenues, but if it's titled already, it's not a big deal, right? You just transfer it to you. Titled in the person's name, that is key to me, because that means that they were at one time a previous owner that insured the bike, right? You can't have insurance if it's not in your name, and in Minnesota you're required to have insurance to transfer it to your name. So I just think, to me, that's important. And two, no keys. I mean, seriously, how are you really trying to sell this with no keys? I'm like, where did they go? I mean, how did you ever ride this? I mean, that to me is just red flags all over the place. So there you go, bike buying tips from Mike. Must have a title, must have keys. And we're gonna move on to the next bike, and that's the bike that I'm gonna always wish I never let go. Alright, so before we get to the last bike of the night, there's one we're gonna interject real quick. The CB900. I bought this bike in a wreck, in a project. And that's a lot of times that's kind of a risk, right? Because it's someone else's project. You're taking for granted that they're telling you the truth, that everything that they've taken off the bike is in all these boxes. But I bought this bike for a couple of reasons. One, it came with a lot of new things. It was a titled bike. There was an engine that I thought would be, at the very least, just something fun to be able to kind of walk through, take apart, and be my first like overhaul. But as time progressed, and then that just kind of was in the way, it just became one of those things that just had to go. So posted that up for sale and sold that in a couple of weeks. It took actually a little while, but someone else decided that they wanted to take that project on, and I ended up selling for exactly what I paid for it. And I kept a lot of things that came with it. Like, there were a whole bunch of new pieces that she had bought. The previous owner had bought, like lights and shocks and an exhaust and tires and a jack stand. And I kept all that stuff and I sold the bike. Just the bike. So broke even on that, made 400 bucks, but that's money back. So it's not really, instead of money spent, it's money back. So there was zero profit, but we got our money back. So I think that was pretty good. Okay. The VFR. Well, I've been saying that that's going to be the bike that I'm going to regret selling. But to be honest, I'm already there. It wasn't supposed to be this way, but it is. And now it's just going to be the story that we get to tell. That bike, just like a lot of the other bikes we've talked about tonight, found on Facebook. It had great pictures, had a good story, riding, running, wanted $1,500 for it. So I contacted the guy. He said, yeah, come on up, take a look. It wasn't too far away, so I decided to grab the trailer, we run up there and go take a look. And we got up there and the story completely changed. Now, I just mentioned some of the rules that I tried to instill about buying bikes. You know, no title, no keys, you walk away. Well, this had a title, but it wasn't in his name. He had bought it earlier that year and rode it around. And as he started riding it less and less, it became more and more problematic, to the point where the last time he rode it, he had to pop start it to get it to start. So that was the next tick box, right? So title, but not in his name. Next one, riding and running in the ad, but it's not running at the moment. So that was a bit suspicious. He says, yeah, we can try to start it, but I don't think it's going to. I'm like, okay. So we tried, and yeah, it didn't. So we pushed it out of his garage, and we just kind of took a closer look, took a couple of shots of it, and sent some to my brother. And he's like, man, that's a great looking bike. I'm like, yeah, I know, but here's the problem. And so we kind of started overlooking the problems, right? Looking past it. We're just kind of, you know, enthralled with what we're looking at as far as this bike. We've never had anything quite like this before. We just would love to have the opportunity. And sometimes you get a bit excited, right? But I kind of held my guns. You know, he wanted $1,500, and clearly at present it wasn't worth that much. So I threw him a number of $800, and he started walking back to the house. So I started walking to the truck, and we probably both took maybe 2 or 3 more feet, and I was willing to change my mind, and he was willing to change his. And so thankfully he went first, and he says, how about $1,000? And I so wanted to say yep, but one of the lessons that I've learned throughout this year is, you know, I didn't need this bike. You know, it was late fall already, and it's just going to sit over the winter. That was actually the plan, was to fix it over the winter and then ride it around the spring all season, actually, with Chase, and just kind of getting to have fun on that bike. So I stuck to my guns. I said, nope, 800. And he said yes. So that's how we got that bike. And to be honest, I didn't think it was really going to be that difficult to get it back up and running, right? We made sure it went through all the gears. We pushed it around, it felt smooth, loaded it on the trailer, and brought it home. Super excited about it, and I was thrilled to have a VFR. Yeah, so were some of you guys. Some of the comments that we got, like, oh, that's a great bike, that's a Honda Legacy, that's, oh, you're gonna love having that. And so we started just normal maintenance stuff, throwing some dollars at it, trying to get it road worthy, even though it really was already. It just it wouldn't start. I mean, I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't start. And so we changed spark plugs, changed the coolant, changed the oil, changed the air filters, tried to find still a reason why we weren't getting fuel. Took the carbs out, cleaned the carbs. We just couldn't figure it out. So eventually I kind of diagnosed that maybe it was the fuel pump. And so we took the fuel pump off, and it was certainly getting fuel to the pump. It just wasn't getting pump fuel up to the carburetor. So we loaded the carburetors up with some stuff, and she started right up. And once it started, now it'll cycle through the fuel pump. So I'm like, okay. And then I actually got to take it for a really, really short ride. Just basically long, about 2 miles. And I took it, basically got it up to speed, like 65, ran through all the gears and brought it back. When we brought it back, it was just dripping fuel, like a faucet on a low drip. It was just drip, 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 drip. I'm like, this isn't gonna work. And so basically, the petcock issues kind of ruined it for me. You know, I tried and tried and tried and tried and tried to sort that out, and I just could not figure it out. So I fell out of love with it, to be honest. And so we put it up for sale. And when I put things up for sale, I'm extremely honest about where things are, especially if they're not in a perfect state, right? And a guy came and looked at it, and he felt like he could fix it. So we sold it to him for what I had in it. So sold it to him for $1,200. And it's probably a great deal for him. I'm sure he's going to be able to fix it. And he sounded like he was very handy at engine repair, and not only motorcycles, but also with cars and trucks. And I think he's going to love it. But there's an interesting story there, right? That my plan was to kind of semi-restore it. It had a couple of cracks in the plastics, but otherwise that bike looked mint. And I was hoping to be able to get it back up running and ready and sell that for maybe closer to $3,000, $3,200. Maybe that's a pipe dream too, I don't know. But selling it for $1,200 kind of broke my heart. But it still got money back. So, you know, the last 2 bikes that we sold this year, we technically broke even on, we'll say. And so far, it's kind of worked for me. We've had a couple of home runs, and we've had a couple of, we never had anything go negative. So that's, I think, positive. But that's kind of the story for 2022. And that's how we got our trailer. The trailer cost us $6,500. And I'm really looking forward to putting that thing to work. It's had a couple of adventures already. Mostly it's moved my kid to college. But nonetheless, we've got one, and we've always wanted one. And we technically kind of got it for free. We still got a little bit of cash in the kitty for going into next year. I'm just dying. I mean, really dying. It's so hard not to be able to buy some bikes this year to kind of build up that inventory, because this is the best time of the year to buy. And but we gotta take a pause, finish the garage, and we'll be back full swing next year.